20 lessons learned from 20 years of life. Now, if you are not already, please go give me a follow on Instagram at James Bracken IV. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss a future episode. And if you listen to this podcast and you've enjoyed it, do me a favor and leave me a rating and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It helps me reach more people, and I'm able to help more people in the process. And if you've tuned into this content, or if you like anything that I do, then check the show notes below where the Mindful Minute, my weekly newsletter, where I help you live with more intention and more mindfulness in less than 60 seconds will be. Without further ado, let's hop into this one. Number one is to focus on the questions and not look for the answers. I think for a lot of us, we're looking outside of ourselves to find the answers in life. I think so many of us are looking for the one step, the 3 steps to success. We're looking for the shortcuts. And I think when we change our perception of looking for the answers and we start looking for the questions, well, the questions that we ask ourselves is going to determine the quality of our life. And so instead of looking outside of yourself, you start to look inside yourself. You start to be intentional about asking the right questions, because those are going to lead you down a different path. It's going to change your perception of the world. It's going to change the quality of your life. It's going to change the actions that you take. Everything in life is determined by the quality of the questions that you ask yourself. And when you're so intentional about asking the right questions, it's going to lead you down a different path. Instead of waiting for the right answers or waiting for something to happen in your life for you to make a change, it's for up to you. And I've realized this there's really time and time again that our curiosity is what leads us to a extravagant life, an extraordinary life. I've seen this time and time again with people that I've spoken to and people I've had on the podcast, is that when we ask the right questions, we will get better answers. But if we're only looking for the answers, they're never going to come. Number two is that there isn't an end. And I really didn't know how to word this one, but I thought it was really intentional about bringing this in, because I think so many of us are waiting for something outside of ourselves to then be happy, to then see ourselves as successful, to then give ourselves self-love, to then really live life and enjoy life for what it is, to really allow ourselves to have peace in the process. And I found myself do this in life where I put my peace, I put my life, I put my experiences, I put so much off, because when I get somewhere, then I'm going to be happy. When I get somewhere, then I'm going to see myself as successful, or then I will be able to be happy, whatever it comes down to. When we recognize that problems never go away, problems replace problems. And we recognize that no matter what we accomplish, there's always going to be something else that we want to accomplish. Then we can give ourselves the permission. And it's so important to give ourselves the permission to enjoy where you are now, instead of putting your joy, your peace, your life really off until you achieve something. And this is something that I think a lot of high achievers deal with, especially, is that we get in this pattern of waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, when you have to recognize that the only life you're going to live is the one that you're a part of and you're present for. Number three is that there is power in proximity. And I've seen this time and time again in my life, starting from when I was going to become a real estate agent. I instead of trying to do it all on my own, I started surrounding myself with real estate agents, and I became the youngest person, Keller Williams, ever to really be surrounded by that. I was at 17 years old. I didn't even have my license yet, and I was already trying to be surrounded by people that were more successful than me. And when I started my coaching business, instead of trying to do it on my own, I hired a coach from the jump. I really invested more money than I had, and tried to figure it out, because we have to look at life like this. You can either spend money or you can spend time. Time is finite and money is infinite. And if we're always trying to do it on our own because our pride, our ego gets in the way, we are going to delay the life that we could have lived. And I think that when you get to the end of your life, there's going to be a lot more things that you wish you did do than the things that you didn't. And so you can either pay in time or you can pay in money. And I don't know about you, but I would much rather spend the money to build the skills to create more money, so that I can live a life now instead of putting off the life later. And that power of proximity is so, so powerful, because it really opens up so much for you. When I invested into the coaching program, I was the youngest person over 1,000 coaches. And what it did for me wasn't the information that I got from the coaching program, but more so the awareness that it was possible. I was seeing other people doing what I wanted to do. And it gave me the belief within myself to take the action to create that and to be able to do it for myself. But if I did it on my own, I would just be in this box that I placed myself in, because I didn't allow myself to really invest in what could be. And so I put off that for longer and longer and longer. And I see this happen so much, but I see this happen with my clients. Even when they start working with me, it's a commitment, and they start to realize that, man, you start surrounding yourself with different people, you open up your mind, and it just opens so much, because when you change your beliefs, you really change the action that you take, and you change the results that you get. And that just reinforces. And the power of proximity is something that can really transform that, and really is so powerful. Number four is that life happens for you, not to you. And this one I've probably said 1,000 times. If you tune into this podcast, you've probably heard me say this, but I really can't express how much this is so important because it changed my life. And this goes back to the questions that you ask yourself, because there was a moment in time where I asked, instead of asking, why is this happening to me? I asked, how is this happening for me? I lost my father and uncle, both passed away at 37 years old. My grandfather passed away a few months before his retirement. I went through a lot of depression and anxiety and just a lot growing up. And I always ask, why is this happening to me? And well, if you ask that question, you're gonna get an answer. Your brain's gonna produce an answer. Why is this happening to me? Well, you don't deserve more. Well, you're not worthy of more. Well, this is just how life is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And instead of asking that, I started asking, how is this happening for me? Well, losing family growing up allowed me to recognize that time is really, really a precious resource. And we have to be intentional about the time that we're given, or we're going to get to the end of our life with a hell of a lot of regret. And I can go on and on and on about this exact idea, but it's so important to recognize that life is happening for you. But you will only see that once you take on that perspective. And I guarantee you it will change the direction of your life. Number five is that you will never outpace your idea of yourself. At its core, we're all looking for the answers outside of us. We're all looking for someone to come save us, to make the change that we want in our life. But at its core, no matter how much we accomplish, no matter what happens in life, we will always go back to what we see ourselves as. And I've seen this time and time again. When I had Gay Hendricks on the podcast, he is a psychiatrist. He's done so much in his life. And after working with 20,000 people, he came back to this realization that we are always going to self-sabotage to reinforce what we believe about ourselves. The big leap is like when everything's going good in our life, we're going to self-sabotage to stay where we think we deserve to be. And so you have to recognize that no matter what happens in the external, no matter what you have, no matter what you accomplish, no matter what you do, you will always go back down to what you perceive yourself to be. And so instead of looking outside of yourself, start to recognize that you have to change your perception of yourself, to change the actions that you take, to change the results that you get, and to change your life in itself. And instead of thinking of wanting to have something, you have to recognize you have to become a different kind of person. It goes be, do, have. We have to be the kind of person, we have to do those kind of things, and then we will have the kind of things that that person has. But if we're always focused on what we want or how we're going to get there, well, then we're never going to get there, because we have to change what is at its core. What is the thing that's going to get there? And that's who we perceive ourselves to be. Number six is that change requires commitment, not confidence. And I noticed this again when I invested into the coaching program that I invested into, because what happened was me investing that money, more money than I had, I was committing myself at a higher degree than I had ever committed myself to before. And it wasn't that I had the confidence, but it was that I committed myself that created the confidence. Because once I committed, well, then I changed my idea of myself, because I'm someone that invests in themselves. I'm someone that shows up for themselves. I'm someone that bets on themselves. And when you do that, you're going to change the actions that you take. You're going to change the results that you get. And again, you're going to change your life in itself. But when we're waiting for something to happen to us, when we're waiting to feel ready, when we're waiting to have the confidence, well, then we wait our life away, because we're never going to feel ready. And so it requires a commitment. And I've seen this in clients too, is when they invest into themselves, it's terrifying. And they have this idea of themselves that limits them from showing up for themselves. But as soon as they start working with me and they make that commitment, they make that investment into themselves, they instantly change the way that they show up for themselves, because they made the commitment. They don't have the confidence. Most people don't have the confidence. But when you make the commitment, confidence instantly rises, because you are committing to yourself like you have never committed yourself before. I've seen this in clients again and again, and their life changes from that. And so instead of waiting for the confidence, make the commitment. Number seven is that most of it is unlearning, not learning. A lot of us, and I've seen this in myself, is I'm trying to listen to the next podcast. I'm trying to listen to the next audiobook or the book or whatever the resource that's outside of myself, to learn what I am missing, to learn to take on all of the information that I think I need to then take action. But what we need to do is unlearn the beliefs about ourselves that are holding us back from taking the action. It's not that we need more information, because we have everything that we need within us. We just need to be able to take the action to create the results. And that's at its core is unlearning the beliefs about ourselves, the beliefs about the world that hold us back from taking the action. And so this paradigm shift is so important to recognize, but you do not need more information. You need to unlearn the beliefs about yourself that are stopping you from taking the action to create the results. That's it. This is why every guest that I have on the podcast, the last question I ask is, what belief are you currently unlearning? Because you'll realize that every single person is still unlearning so much in their life. And at its core, that's what we need to do. Number 8 is that confrontation is the catalyst for growth. When we think about it in life, so many of us are putting off something. Maybe it's a task, maybe it is leaving our job, whatever it is, maybe it's addressing a problem. We are all putting off something in our lives. And once we stop putting off that thing, life changes. What we have to do is confront instead of avoid. And so many of us are trying to avoid the hard truth. So many of us are trying to avoid the work. So many of us are just trying to put off the life that we want because we are scared to confront what we have to confront, or we're fearful. And so once we're intentional about confronting the things that we don't want to confront, you'll start to realize that making those decisions to confront that thing every single day, and this is like the idea of eat the frog, right? Do the hardest thing first because everything else becomes easier throughout the day, is when we're intentional about confronting things every single day and we make that a habit, our life is going to change faster than you could possibly imagine. Number 9 is that the little things are the big things. We think that hitting the snooze button, we think that putting off the gym till tomorrow, we think that, doing the small things don't have that much of an impact. But the small things is what leads to the big things, right? It's that idea that how we do one thing is how we do everything, right? When you hit your snooze the first thing in the morning, that leads into putting off the things throughout your day. And what at its core, what's important is that we have to keep our promises to ourselves, because the small promises that we make, they seem insignificant, are the things that really change our perception of ourselves. And going back to what I said earlier, is like you're never going to outpace your idea of yourself. And so if you're always not keeping your promises to yourself, then why would you show up for yourself? It's like if you made a date, or if you said that you're going to meet with someone, a friend, and they don't show up, why would you trust them to show up next time? And that's gonna be a reinforcing loop in your life. And so you have to keep the promises to yourself, no matter how small they seem. You keep your promises to yourself, and it will genuinely change the direction of your life. It starts with the small things because they lead to the big things. And so being so intentional about this, like if I could say anything, this is the thing that you need to understand, is that you need to keep your promises to yourself, because every single time you don't, your perception of yourself and your confidence within yourself depletes. And that's going to cause you to not take action in the future, and it's going to delay the life that you deserve to create for yourself. And so keeping your promises to yourself is probably the most important thing that you can do. Number 10 is that it's not about being understood, but it's about acknowledging yourself. And this one is so, so important, because in life, a lot of us want to feel understood. A lot of us want to feel seen. All of us want to feel seen. All of us want to feel loved. All of us want to be recognized. But at the beginning, especially, most aren't going to understand it. When I started my coaching business, no one had any idea what I was doing. And it was really difficult for me to not get recognized from the people, especially the people that I grew up with, the people that I went to school with, family, friends. Most people are not going to understand what you're doing, especially if you're going down an ordinary path. Like starting at 17 years old, I started a life coaching business. How does it make any sense? So many people had such preconceived notions that it was terrifying to do it. And again, it goes back to the commitment, because once I committed and I made that investment into myself, well, then I committed to myself, and I had to make the change. I had to start showing up on social media. I had to do all of these things that were going to change my life. But it was acknowledging what I truly felt in alignment with within myself, and not thinking about what other people think about me, not being understood by other people. Because when you're looking for outside recognition and you don't give it to yourself, well, no matter how much recognition you get, you're never going to feel seen, because at the core, what matters is how you see yourself. It's how you feel about yourself. And so instead of looking for the recognition, or looking for the acceptance, or being understood by other people, because you're never going to be fully understood, and especially if you're doing something that's out of the ordinary, you have to acknowledge yourself. Acknowledge your gifts, acknowledge what you really feel aligned with, because at its core, that's what you're here for. And you do a disservice by putting off the things that you know that you're here to do. Like this podcast, my coaching business, I would have not have been able to help people if I didn't acknowledge that I have a gift in helping people. I wouldn't have been able to start this podcast and be 190 episodes plus in if I didn't acknowledge who I was and the core of what I felt I belonged here. I wouldn't have been able to really create this life that I live today if I didn't acknowledge that this is why I'm here. And so instead of looking for the acceptance in others, instead of being or trying to be understood from others, recognize that no one's going to understand you like you can understand yourself. But it first starts with acknowledging who you really feel you are supposed to be. And that's something that's really difficult to do. And it can be lonely, it can be scary, and it definitely is. But I guarantee you it's the best thing that you'll ever do, because at its core, at the end of our life, the number one regret is that I wish I lived in alignment with myself and not what other people's expected of me. So really take that in, because at the end of your life, there's going to be a lot more things that you wish you did do than the things that you didn't. And at its core, that starts with you acknowledging what you feel you are meant to do and who you really truly feel you are in life, not what other people want you to be. Number 11 is that your limits are self-imposed. This is a hard one to accept, and it's going to be difficult. It goes back to the power of proximity. Once you see other people do something in your life, it breaks your limitation. It breaks your perception of yourself. It breaks your perception of the world. It breaks your paradigm, the way that you see the world in itself. Like when I started my coaching business, or just in general, when I started down this entrepreneurial path, I thought that $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 was a lot of money. And I started surrounding myself with people that were making $100,000, $250,000, $1,000,000 a month. And so seeing that, it will literally change the idea of what you think a limit is. And so you have to recognize that all of your limits that you place on yourself, that you place on what you think is possible, they're self-imposed. You gave them to yourself. You took them on from, whether it was someone that you grew up with, maybe it's a people. We all have these self-imposed limitations. And once we start to question those limitations, we start to realize that life is so much more expansive than we could possibly imagine. But it's recognizing first that we are the ones that limit ourselves. There's nothing else that limits us, right? We can say that our experience limits us. We can say that the people around us limit us. We can say that how we grew up limits us. But you will see that someone that you didn't think could possibly create something because they came from this place did. And you start to recognize that our limitations are self-imposed. And as soon as we recognize that, we can start questioning those limitations. Instead of accepting them, we start questioning them. And that opens up a life that we didn't know possible. And I'm saying this from being 20 years old, being full-time into entrepreneurship, and helping people show up better for their goals that are older than me, that are doing better things than me when it comes to whatever it is. Like, we have to recognize that your limitations are self-imposed. And as soon as you recognize that and you take that on that belief and you acknowledge that, your life will expand from then. Number 12 is that your power is in your perspective. And I literally got this tatted on my arm if you're seeing this on YouTube. I believe in this so much, and I will tell a story based on this. Is there was a father that had two kids, and this father was an alcoholic. And these two kids grew up to live completely different lives. One used the excuse that he ended up becoming an alcoholic. And he said, well, someone came up to him and said, well, why are you an alcoholic? And he said, well, my dad was an alcoholic growing up. So I took that on. And the other son, well, he created a massive business and created a flourishing life. And someone came up and asked him, how have you been able to do this? Well, my dad was an alcoholic. So I realized I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be that. I didn't want to create that kind of life. And so I made the change because my father was an alcoholic. And it's that because that we have to change. We can use our experience, our life as an excuse, or we can use it as a catalyst. And at its core, it's going to be in your perspective that's going to change that. Like, two people can go see the same movie and have two different perspectives simply based on their perspective, or two different experiences, two different takeaways simply based on their perspective. And so when you change your perspective in life, you change your life. And it really comes down to the beliefs that you have about the world, the beliefs that you have about yourself, all of that kind of stuff. But it's so, so important, because in life, the way that we see the world is based on our perspective. And if we're able to carve out our perspective and change our perspective about the world, we can create a much better life and a much more enjoyable life. Number 13 is that failure is not something to be avoided, but it's something that's to be inspected and seeked. When we go through life, especially in school, this is why I hate the school system, we're taught that if we fail a test, we are a failure. If we go through sports, this is something that I see happen so much, is that whether it's in sports or a creative field, we attach our self-worth to our thing. And so if something fails, we perceive ourselves as a failure. And that's a paradigm that we have to break through, because failure is feedback. It allows us to show up for ourselves better in the future. If we inspect why we failed, if we inspect how we failed, like what caused the failure, then we won't fail in the future, or at least we'll be a little bit better next time. But if we want to avoid it, well, then we're never going to learn from the failure. We're always going to see ourselves as a failure, and we're never going to be able to up level in our life, because we're avoiding the very thing that's going to allow us to up level in our life. So when you change your perspective from failure is final to failure is feedback, or failure is me, to failure is feedback, we'll start to seek it, and we'll start to show up better for ourselves in the future and end up creating a better life for ourselves. Number 14 is that discipline is not a punishment, but it's a practice. And that's exactly how you should perceive it. The way that I want to explain this to you is instead of seeing discipline as a punishment, as seeing it as, I have to be disciplined because this is what I want to achieve. I have to suffer. I have to go through this. We have to start seeing it as a practice, because when we see it as a practice, we see it as something that we just do. and it creates the life that we want to live. It's like when you go to the gym, you never feel like showing up to the gym, but you always feel better after you did. Right. And so if we can start seeing or thinking about how we want to feel after things instead of before things, and we practice doing that instead of seeing it as a punishment, like, oh, I have to go to the gym today. I really don't feel like showing up today. Of course, there's gonna be a lot of things that you don't feel like doing in life. But when we get into the practice of doing those things, and instead of putting so much pressure on ourselves throughout it, it'll become easier to do. And it will then change your life in the process because most of what we want in life comes from doing the things that we don't want to do. Number 15 is that suffering is optional when pain is inevitable, right? We're going to go through things in life that are painful. We're going to hurt our arm. We're going to get in a relationship that doesn't work out. We're going to fail in things. There's pain that's going to happen, but the suffering is something that is optional. Because just because we're going through pain doesn't mean we have to suffer through that pain. Suffering is like an internal dialogue of how we think things should be versus how things actually are. It's that expectation. And when we take off that expectation, we recognize that we don't have to suffer through this. It doesn't have to be an experience that we have to suffer through, but it's the acceptance of things. It's the acceptance of pain that releases the suffering because we place so much suffering on ourselves because we think things should be a different way. We think things shouldn't be the way that they are. And that expectation that things shouldn't be the way they are, that unacceptance is what causes that suffering. But we can go through life without suffering. We just have to recognize that it's the expectation that's holding us back from doing so. And so as soon as we're able to accept things, and Man's Search for Meaning is a great book on this because being in an Auschwitz camp, it's like, that's the worst of the worst. But his ability to accept where he was the ability to allow him to still enjoy his life, even though he was going through the worst times in his life. And I'm talking about Viktor Frankl. And so really recognizing that our suffering in life is self-inflicted, just like our limits, will open up so much in our lives. Number 16 is that intentionality is the antidote to a wasted life. So many of us are going through life coasting. And I've seen this from when I left high school, and I've seen so many of the friends of mine go to college and they coasted through college because they wanted to see it as an opportunity to, put life off a little bit more. And I took it as an opportunity to this is my time to be intentional so that when I really want to, so I can just get ahead in life. And that's that intentionality that is so, so important. Is in everything that you're doing, whether it's showing up every single day and having an intention for what you're going to do that day, to the kind of vision that you have for your life and what you want to create for yourself 3 months, 3 years, 5 years down the road. That's what's going to lead you down a life that you really want to live instead of living a life that is expected of you or a life that most people live. You're gonna be the 1% in life, and whatever you do, if you're intentional about doing that. But it's really being intentional about doing so. So if you don't want to waste your life, if you don't want to waste the gifts that you have, if you don't want to waste every single day, you have to be intentional about doing so because it's not just going to happen. Number 17 is that we are all figuring it out. I think something that a lot of us struggle with is comparison. And especially in this age of social media, it's something to really take into perspective and really just take that internal dialogue and recognize that everyone's figuring it out. No matter who you see, no matter what you see, most of what you see is a highlight reel, not reality. And I've seen this because even just spending last weekend that I was just at the Lewis House event, spending time with people that are making 7 figures a month, whatever it is, they're still facing difficult things. They're still figuring it out. They don't have all of the answers. No one has all the answers. And I think that was something that I thought growing up was I seen people doing what I wanted to do. I saw people doing expansive, intentional, really amazing things. And I thought that they had it all figured out, but no one has it all figured out. And when you recognize that we're all just figuring it out, you'll start to allow yourself to fail more. You'll allow yourself to take more action, to do more things that you're scared of, because you'll recognize that no one has it figured out. And taking on that belief and recognizing that and really internalizing that will allow you to live a more joy-filled and just expansive life. Number 18 is that the world belongs to those that can keep doing things when the results aren't showing up. The biggest failure in life is failing to act. It's failing to show up. It's really just stopping. Like in anything that you do, those that fail are the people that stop. Those that succeed are the people that just kept going. And there's, especially in the beginning of things, there's going to be a lot of times where you don't see results. There's going to be a lot of times where you feel like this is pointless to do. But those that succeed are the ones that break through those periods of time so they can get to the point where the results actually do show up. And I see this in my podcast and everything in life. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be really difficult to show up when the results aren't showing up. Your ego is going to tell you to stop, that you shouldn't do this, that other people are looking at you in a bad way. It's going to be really difficult to break through that paradigm in the world. But when you recognize that the only failure is stopping and that the world really belongs to the people that just don't stop, I think that you'll live a much more intentional and more really just joy-filled life instead of waiting till the end or really always hoping for the results. Because if you focus on your intention and not your expectation, your life will change. If you focus on the actions that you have to take and not the results that you want to get, your life will change. You'll start to enjoy taking the action instead of getting the result. Because if you're always focused on the result, well, you're not going to last. Number 19 is something that I've had as a sticky note right next to my door for many years. And it's that if you want an easy life, you have to do hard things. I most days don't feel like waking up to go to the gym, but I'm always grateful after I do it. I was terrified to start my coaching business, terrified to start my podcast, but it was doing the hard things that made those hard things just a little bit easier, right? I mean, it never becomes really easy. Like the hard things are always going to be hard, but the more that you get into practice of doing those hard things, the more that you'll realize that your life just expands in the process. Because most of, you know, our failures in life come from avoiding what we know we have to do, and that's the hard things. So when we just accept that life is going to become a lot easier when you just do hard things on a daily basis. This is why people do cold plunges. This is why people go to the gym. No one wants to do the hard thing, but it comes down to doing the hard things that makes life just a little bit easier every single day. And number 20, before I say number 20, I have to say that these are in no specific order. I feel like I could have expanded on so many different things that I've learned throughout my life, but these were just things that came up to me recently. And the last one is that all that matters is how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself. At its core, no matter what we accomplish, no matter what we do, no matter where we're going, no matter what happens in life, what really matters is how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself. Because the purpose of life is to enjoy the passage of time. It's not to achieve said goal. It's not to do said thing, but it's to recognize that all that matters is how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself. Because if you don't feel good with yourself, then what's the purpose of being here? So once you really accept that self-love, that the intention is to really love yourself fully, you're going to show up for yourself better for things. And this is why discipline is a practice, not a punishment, is like when you start to build from self-love, like I'm going to do this thing because I love myself, not because I hate myself. Well, it's actually going to last long term. And so when you make prioritizing um, your perception of yourself, how you feel about yourself, all of that kind of stuff, your life is going to flourish in the process. But when we're always looking outside of ourselves, when we're always looking for something to mask what we're hurting inside, instead of recognizing ourselves and acknowledging ourselves and loving ourselves right now, instead of putting it off until we do something or accomplish something or overcome a problem, we will live a much, much, much better and more fulfilled life if we're intentional about how we feel about ourselves when we are by ourselves. And I think when we do that, this is why meditation has been so powerful for me, going on walks, all of that kind of stuff has been so powerful, because all that matters is how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself. At the end of the day, that's all that truly matters. And so I am truly grateful if you're still here. This is a much longer solo episode than I've ever done, but I thought it was powerful. And if there was anyone that stood out to you, if there's anything that really that you need to hear, drop a comment. I would love to hear your perspective, because I think these have had such a massive impact on me, and hopefully one thing struck out for you. I appreciate you for tuning in, and I will see you in the next episode.